The autumn breeze rustled through the leaves as a young man sat alone in his doctor's office, his hands trembling as he held the test results. At just 28 years old, Alex never imagined he'd be facing such life-changing news. The doctor's words echoed in his mind: "Your chances of having biological children are less than 1%. For someone who had always dreamed of being a father, who had spent countless hours imagining teaching his future kids to ride bikes and helping them with homework, this news felt like a cruel joke. Alex came from a big family, with 3 siblings and dozens of cousins. Family gatherings were always filled with children's laughter, and he had always assumed that one day, he'd add his own kids to the mix. Growing up in a small town in the Midwest, Alex had followed a pretty traditional path. He'd done well in school, started his own small construction business, and had recently bought a modest house with a backyard perfect for a swing set. He'd even started dating someone special, Rachel, whom he could really see a future with. But now, this diagnosis threatened to derail everything he'd planned. The following weeks were a blur of endless research, specialist appointments, and sleepless nights. Alex found himself avoiding family gatherings, making excuses when his sister invited him to her kids' birthday parties. The sight of happy families at the grocery store or park would send him into a spiral of sadness and self-doubt. How could he tell Rachel? Would she still want a future with him? One particularly difficult evening, as Alex sat on his front porch watching the neighborhood kids play, his phone buzzed with a notification. It was from a support group for people dealing with infertility that he'd reluctantly joined. Someone had shared a story about adoption, and for the first time in weeks, Alex felt a tiny spark of hope. He spent that night reading everything he could find about adoption. Stories of families formed through love rather than biology filled his screen. By morning, his perspective had started to shift. Maybe being a father wasn't about passing on his genes. Maybe it was about something much deeper. When he finally gathered the courage to tell Rachel over coffee at their favorite diner, her reaction surprised him. Instead of the disappointment he'd feared, she squeezed his hand and shared her own story. Her best friend had been adopted, and she'd always considered adoption a beautiful way to build a family. As they talked, their coffee grew cold, but their connection grew stronger. Together, they started attending adoption information sessions. They learned about different types of adoption, the challenges and joys of adoptive parenting, and the importance of maintaining connections with biological families when possible. Alex found himself particularly drawn to stories of special needs adoption, remembering his own struggles with dyslexia as a child and how his parents' support had made all the difference. What happened next would change their lives forever. During one of these sessions, they learned about 3 brothers, ages 4, 3, and 18 months, who needed a home together. The boys had been born with the same genetic condition that had caused Alex's infertility. When Alex heard this, he felt an immediate connection that he couldn't explain. The social worker shared more details about the boys. They were bright, energetic, and loving, but their condition meant they needed extra medical care and attention. Many potential adoptive parents had been hesitant to take on 3 children with special needs. But for Alex and Rachel, it felt like fate. The first time they met the boys at the foster home, Alex's heart nearly burst. The oldest, with curious eyes and a shy smile, asked if Alex knew how to build with Legos. The middle child immediately showed off his toy cars, while the baby watched everything with wide-eyed wonder. Rachel sat on the floor with them, and within minutes, they were all laughing together. The adoption process wasn't easy. There were mountains of paperwork, home studies, and countless meetings with social workers and medical professionals. Alex and Rachel had to prove they could handle the boys' medical needs and provide a stable, loving environment. They took parenting classes, researched the boys' condition, and prepared their home for 3 active children. Their families rallied around them. Alex's parents helped convert the spare bedroom into a cheerful space for the boys, while Rachel's sister organized a community fundraiser to help with adoption expenses. The small town showed its heart, with neighbors dropping off children's books, toys, and hand-me-down clothes. The day they brought the boys home was both terrifying and wonderful. As Alex carried the sleeping youngest up to his new room, he realized that his dream of being a father hadn't been destroyed, it had just taken a different path than he'd expected. Looking at these three precious boys, he saw not what he had lost, but everything he had gained. The first few months were a whirlwind of adjustments. There were midnight fears and tears, doctor's appointments, and moments of overwhelming doubt. But there were also first words, wobbly steps, and bedtime stories. The boys' condition meant they needed regular medical care, but it also meant they understood each other in a way no one else could. They were building their own unique family story. As Alex watched the boys play in the backyard he'd once feared would remain empty, he realized that sometimes life's biggest heartbreaks can lead to its greatest blessings. He hadn't just become a father, he'd become the exact father these three special boys needed. The swing set he'd finally built wasn't just a piece of playground equipment, it was a symbol of dreams reimagined and love multiplied. The first year of parenthood brought challenges that Alex and Rachel couldn't have prepared for, no matter how many books they'd read or classes they'd taken. Their quiet home transformed into a bustling hub of activity, filled with the sounds of pattering feet, occasional tears, and frequent bursts of laughter. The oldest boy, who they now called Tommy, took his role as big brother seriously. Despite being only 4, he would help get his younger brothers dressed in the morning, even if it meant shirts went on backward and shoes ended up on the wrong feet. His protective nature touched Alex deeply, reminding him of his own childhood as the eldest sibling. Middle child Danny was their little tornado of energy. Even with the physical challenges from their shared condition, he refused to slow down. Every fall would be followed by a determined, "I'm okay," and another attempt. Rachel spent countless hours childproofing and re-childproofing the house, always one step behind Danny's latest adventure. Baby Charlie, the youngest, was their quiet observer. He would watch his brothers with intense focus, learning from their trials and errors. Despite being the baby of the family, he often seemed like the wisest, with an uncanny ability to sense when someone needed a cuddle. The boy's medical condition meant frequent hospital visits. Each appointment brought a mix of anxiety and hope. Alex would sit in sterile waiting rooms, holding whoever needed comfort at the moment, while Rachel expertly juggled medical charts and insurance paperwork. They became regulars at the children's hospital, where nurses knew each boy by name and kept a special stash of their favorite stickers. One particularly challenging day, all 3 boys needed blood tests. The usual brave faces crumbled, and the examining room echoed with tears and protests. Alex felt his heart breaking, wondering if they were putting the boys through too much. But then something remarkable happened. Tommy, still sniffling from his own test, took his brother's hands and started singing their favorite bedtime song. Soon, all 3 were singing through their tears, their voices wobbly but determined. That moment became a turning point. Alex realized that while he couldn't shield his sons from every difficulty, they had something powerful, each other. The boys understood one another in a way that went beyond words. They shared not just a genetic condition, but a unique bond that turned their challenges into stepping stones. The family calendar became a complex choreography of therapy appointments, doctor visits, and school schedules. Alex adjusted his construction business hours to be more present, often bringing his laptop to hospital waiting rooms. Rachel, who worked as a high school counselor, arranged her schedule to handle afternoon appointments. Their life wasn't easy, but they were making it work. Their home adapted too. The garage transformed into a therapy space where the boys could work on their physical exercises. The kitchen counter lowered to allow the boys to help with cooking. Every modification was a statement: this home would work for their family, exactly as they were. Small victories became cause for major celebration. When Danny took his first unassisted steps at age 4, the whole family danced around the living room. When Tommy wrote his name for the first time, despite his shaky hands, it went straight to the center of the refrigerator. And when Charlie finally said his first word, brothers, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. The condition that had once seemed like a curse to Alex now revealed itself as a unique gift. He understood his son's struggles in a way most parents couldn't. When they felt frustrated by their physical limitations, he could share his own experiences. When they worried about being different, he could show them how being different had made him stronger. Their family stood out in their small town, but not in the ways Alex had initially feared. Instead of pitying looks, they received waves of support. The local hardware store owner would save empty boxes for the boys' craft projects. Their elderly neighbor, Mrs. Chen, would bring over homemade soup when she knew they had hospital days. The community embraced them, differences and all. Rachel's strength amazed Alex daily. She approached each new challenge with a mixture of determination and grace. When Tommy struggled to keep up in regular kindergarten, she researched alternative teaching methods and worked with his teachers to develop adapted learning strategies. When Danny's physical therapy became too expensive, she organized a fundraising run that brought the whole town together. The boys' different personalities began to shine through more each day. Tommy developed a passion for art, finding ways to hold brushes that worked with his motor skills. Danny's energy found an outlet in adaptive sports, where he showed a natural talent for swimming. Charlie revealed himself as a budding musician, humming constantly and trying to play any instrument he could reach. One evening, as Alex sat helping Tommy with his art project while Danny practiced his swimming exercises and Charlie banged enthusiastically on his toy drums, he caught Rachel's eye across the room. They shared a smile that held volumes, exhaustion, joy, gratitude, and love all mixed together. This beautiful chaos was their normal now, and they wouldn't have it any other way. Life had thrown them curveballs, but they'd learned to catch them together. The diagnosis that had once threatened to destroy Alex's dreams of fatherhood had instead led him to exactly where he needed to be. His sons might share his medical condition, but more importantly, they shared his resilience, his determination, and his capacity for joy. As seasons changed and the boys grew, their little family faced one of their biggest challenges yet, school. Tommy would be starting first grade, Danny was entering preschool, and even little Charlie would begin early intervention programs. The thought of sending his children into the world, where they might face misunderstanding or unkindness, kept Alex awake at night. The week before school started, Alex and Rachel sat down with Tommy to talk about his concerns. Their usually confident firstborn seemed smaller somehow, curled up in his favorite beanbag chair. "What if the other kids don't understand?" he whispered. Alex felt his heart squeeze, remembering his own school days and similar fears. But Tommy surprised them both by straightening up and adding, "I want to tell them about our special family. About how we're all the same, and that's what makes us super cool." Rachel wiped away tears as Alex hugged his son, marveling at the wisdom in his young heart. The family worked together to prepare for this new chapter. They visited the schools multiple times, meeting with teachers and staff to explain the boys' condition and needs. Rachel created detailed information packets, complete with emergency contacts and medical procedures. Alex spent weekends installing special equipment in Tommy's classroom and Danny's preschool, ensuring his sons could participate fully in activities. The first day of school arrived with a mix of excitement and anxiety. Tommy wore his favorite superhero backpack, specially modified to be easier for him to manage. Danny bounced around the house in his new light-up shoes, while Charlie clung to Rachel's leg, unsure about all the changes. As Alex helped Tommy out of the car at the elementary school, a group of children ran past, laughing and shouting. Tommy gripped his father's hand tighter, but then something wonderful happened. A little girl with glasses stopped and waved. "I like your backpack," she called out. "Want to walk in together?" That simple moment of kindness set the tone for what was to come. Tommy's teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, had prepared his classmates, explaining that everyone's bodies work differently and that's what makes the world interesting. Soon, Tommy was known not as the kid with the condition, but as the best artist in class and the one who always shared his snacks. Danny's transition to preschool proved more challenging. His endless energy, combined with his physical limitations, meant he needed constant supervision. But his teacher discovered that giving him special jobs, like being the class weather reporter, helped channel his enthusiasm productively. Soon, Danny's determination inspired his classmates, who would cheer him on during physical therapy sessions that took place during school hours. Charlie's early intervention program revealed hidden talents. His speech therapist discovered his extraordinary ear for music, using songs to help him develop his language skills. Though still the quietest of the three, Charlie began to find his voice through melody, often humming to comfort his brothers when they had rough days. The boys' condition meant they tired more easily than their peers, and some days were harder than others. Alex and Rachel learned to read the signs, when to push and when to pull back, when to advocate and when to let their sons fight their own battles. They celebrated every victory, no matter how small, Tommy learning to zip his jacket independently, Danny managing a full day of school without a nap, Charlie stringing together his first complete sentence. Their home became a hub for after-school activities, as the boys' friends discovered it was the most interesting house on the block. Alex had modified the backyard with adaptive equipment that made play accessible for everyone. The garage-turned-therapy room doubled as a rainy day playground. Rachel's kitchen table often hosted homework clubs, where children learned early lessons about patience and helping others. One autumn afternoon, during a parent-teacher conference, Tommy's teacher shared something that touched Alex deeply. She described how Tommy had become a natural leader in class, not despite his challenges but because of them. When a new student joined the class using a wheelchair, Tommy was the first to show him around, explaining all the adaptive equipment with expertise and enthusiasm. The boys' influence rippled through their small community. The local playground installed accessible equipment after Danny's preschool class wrote letters to the city council. The elementary school started an Inclusion Awareness Week, inspired by Tommy's openness about his condition. The music teacher at Charlie's program began incorporating adaptive instruments, allowing more children to participate in performances. Family dynamics evolved too. Each boy developed their unique way of contributing to household life. Tommy became the family artist, decorating the walls with colorful murals that told their story. Danny, despite his physical challenges, insisted on helping with chores, inventing creative ways to carry laundry and feed their newly adopted cat. Charlie's music filled their home with constant soundtrack, his humming and singing becoming the heartbeat of their daily routines. Alex's construction business took an unexpected turn as he began specializing in accessible home modifications. His personal experience gave him insight into what families like his needed, and soon he was helping other parents create spaces where their children could thrive. Rachel's work as a school counselor similarly evolved, as she became an advocate for inclusive education practices. One evening, as the family sat around their dinner table, now equipped with special grips and custom height chairs, Alex looked at his sons and felt overwhelming gratitude. Tommy was explaining his latest art project, his hands gesturing excitedly despite their tremors. Danny was demonstrating his new swimming techniques, nearly knocking over his milk in enthusiasm. Charlie was softly humming while arranging his food into musical note patterns. These were the moments that reminded Alex how far they'd come. The diagnosis that once seemed like an ending had become a beginning. His sons faced challenges, yes, but they faced them together, with strength, creativity, and joy. They were writing their own story, one that proved family isn't about perfect bodies or perfect lives, it's about perfect love. As Rachel caught his eye across the table, they shared one of their silent conversations, both thinking the same thing: their family might not look like what they'd originally imagined, but it was more beautiful than anything they could have planned. The boys' condition, once seen as a limitation, had become the foundation of their unique family bond, teaching them all that sometimes life's greatest gifts come in unexpected packages. Time moved forward, bringing new challenges and triumphs as the boys approached their pre-teen years. Tommy was now 10, Danny 9, and Charlie 7. Their condition remained a constant companion in their lives, but it no longer defined them. Instead, it had become just one part of their rich family tapestry. The idea of their first real family vacation came from Danny, who'd become fascinated with marine life through his swimming therapy. He'd spotted a brochure for an accessible beach resort that offered adaptive water sports programs. The whole family gathered around their kitchen table one evening, planning what seemed like an impossible dream. Alex and Rachel spent months preparing, coordinating with medical teams, researching accessible activities, and saving every extra penny. The boys contributed too, selling their artwork and performing mini concerts in their front yard. The community rallied around them once again, with Alex's construction clients and Rachel's fellow teachers buying tickets to their backyard fundraising carnival. The morning they left for their beach adventure, their van packed with medical supplies, adaptive equipment, and 3 excited boys, Alex felt a mixture of terror and exhilaration. They were about to venture far from their safety net of familiar doctors and routines. But seeing the joy on his sons' faces as they pulled out of their driveway made every worry worthwhile. Their arrival at the beach resort brought tears to Rachel's eyes. The staff had prepared everything perfectly, from their fully accessible suite to the specially trained activity coordinators. The boys' room was equipped with all the adaptive features they needed, but it was the view of the ocean that captivated them. They spent that first evening on their balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors that Tommy immediately wanted to capture in his next painting. The week that followed became a testament to what was possible when limitations were seen as challenges to overcome rather than roadblocks. Danny discovered he could surf with the help of an adaptive board and dedicated instructors. His natural affinity for water made him a quick learner, and his infectious enthusiasm encouraged other children at the resort to try adaptive sports. Tommy found his artistic inspiration exploding in the new environment. He spent hours on the beach, his adaptive art supplies spread around him, capturing everything from seabirds to sandcastles. The resort's activity center displayed his paintings, and soon other guests were commissioning pieces from the young artist. Charlie, their quiet musician, discovered the joy of beach acoustics. He would sit near the water's edge during calmer moments, singing with the waves as his backdrop. One evening, he joined the resort's house band for their sunset performance, his pure voice carrying across the beach as his brothers cheered him on. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were moments of frustration when their bodies wouldn't cooperate with their adventurous spirits. One particularly difficult day, Danny's condition flared up, leaving him too exhausted to join the afternoon's swimming session. His brothers, without hesitation, stayed behind with him, turning their hotel room into an imaginary underwater kingdom complete with pillow fort coral reefs. The trip taught them all something valuable about themselves. Alex watched his sons tackle new challenges with determination and grace, supporting each other through difficult moments and celebrating every achievement, no matter how small. Rachel documented everything, creating a photo journal that would remind them that anything was possible with enough planning, support, and love. Back home, the boys returned with more than just seashells and souvenirs. They carried with them a new confidence, a deeper understanding of their capabilities, and dreams bigger than they'd dared to have before. Their successful trip became a blueprint for future adventures, proving that their condition didn't have to limit their experiences. The boys' interests continued to develop in unexpected ways. Tommy's art evolved to include digital creation, adapting to technology that made it easier for his hands to express his vision. His work began gaining attention beyond their small town, with an online gallery showcasing his unique perspective on living with physical challenges. Danny's love for swimming transformed into a passion for advocacy. Despite his young age, he started speaking at local schools about adaptive sports, showing other children that different abilities didn't mean fewer opportunities. His enthusiasm was contagious, and soon the local recreation center expanded its adaptive sports program. Charlie's musical talent flourished in new directions. He taught himself to play adaptive instruments, creating his own methods when traditional techniques proved challenging. His music teacher described him as having not just perfect pitch, but perfect persistence, as he refused to let physical limitations stop him from making the sounds he heard in his head. Alex's construction business had become known throughout the region for its innovative accessible designs. He often consulted with other families raising children with similar conditions, sharing not just his professional expertise but also his personal experience. The nervous father he'd once been now helped other parents see the possibilities rather than the limitations. Rachel's role in the special education department made her a fierce advocate for inclusive education. She organized workshops for teachers, sharing strategies that had worked for her own children. Her first-hand experience as both a parent and educator gave her insights that helped bridge the gap between families and schools. Their home continued to evolve with their needs. The garage-turned-therapy room now included a recording space for Charlie, an art studio corner for Tommy, and adaptive exercise equipment for Danny. The backyard became a testing ground for Alex's latest accessible design ideas, with the boys giving input on what worked best for them. One evening, as the family gathered for their weekly movie night, Alex looked around at his sons. Tommy was sketching in his digital tablet, occasionally showing his brothers his latest creation. Danny was doing his physical therapy stretches while enthusiastically describing his next swimming competition. Charlie was quietly composing a new song on his adaptive keyboard, the melody weaving through their conversation. The scene was so different from the future he'd imagined when he'd first received his diagnosis years ago. Back then, he'd thought his dreams of fatherhood were over. Now he realized that sometimes the best dreams are the ones we never knew to dream. Rachel caught his eye and smiled, understanding without words what he was thinking. Their journey hadn't been easy, but it had been infinitely rewarding. Every challenge had made them stronger, every setback had taught them resilience, and every victory had shown them that love knows no limitations. The teenage years arrived with all the typical challenges, amplified by the unique circumstances of their family. Tommy was now 13, Danny 12, and Charlie 10. Their home buzzed with a new kind of energy as hormones, growing independence, and changing perspectives shaped their daily lives. The most noticeable change came from Tommy, who had begun asking deeper questions about his condition. One evening, after a particularly challenging day at physical therapy, he approached Alex in his home office. "Dad," he started, his voice carrying a weight beyond his years, "when did you first know you were different?" That conversation lasted well into the night, father and son sharing experiences and fears they'd both carried silently. Alex spoke openly about his own journey, including the dark days after his diagnosis when he thought his dreams of fatherhood were impossible. Tommy listened intently, occasionally nodding in recognition of feelings he'd struggled to put into words. Danny's response to adolescence took a different form. His passion for swimming had evolved into competitive parasports, and he'd started training with an eye toward future Paralympic Games. The physical demands were intense, especially given his condition, but Danny approached each challenge with his characteristic determination and infectious smile. The local community center had become Danny's second home, where he not only trained but also mentored younger children with various physical challenges. His coaches often remarked that Danny's greatest talent wasn't his swimming ability, but his gift for encouraging others to push past their perceived limitations. Charlie, still the quietest of the three, found his voice through music in increasingly sophisticated ways. He'd begun composing his own pieces, complex melodies that seemed to capture the experience of living with their condition in ways words never could. His music teacher had connected him with a program developing adaptive instruments, and Charlie's insights were helping create new ways for physically challenged musicians to express themselves. Rachel's role had evolved too. She'd completed additional certification in special education advocacy and now ran workshops for parents navigating similar challenges. Her experience raising 3 boys with the same condition that affected her husband gave her a unique perspective that other families found invaluable. Alex's construction business had become a leader in accessible design, but more importantly, it had become a hub for families seeking hope. New clients often came to him not just for his design expertise but for the living proof that a full, rich life was possible despite physical challenges. The boys would often help out at the office, showing younger children that their differences didn't define their futures. One particularly memorable moment came during a school assembly where all 3 boys were invited to speak. Tommy shared his artwork, explaining how he'd adapted his techniques to work with his body rather than against it. Danny demonstrated some of his swimming techniques, showing how determination could overcome physical limitations. Charlie performed an original composition, the music expressing what words couldn't about their shared journey. The audience of students, teachers, and parents sat in rapt attention as the brothers explained how their condition had shaped but not limited their lives. When a young student asked about their biggest challenge, Tommy's response brought tears to many eyes. "The hardest part isn't our condition, it's helping other people see past it to who we really are." Their home life had developed its own unique rhythm. Family game nights now featured adaptive controllers and modified board games, often designed by the boys themselves. The kitchen had become a laboratory for independence, with the brothers working together to prepare meals using adaptive cooking tools. Even their chore system had evolved, with each boy finding creative ways to contribute despite their physical limitations. The boys' relationship with technology opened new doors. Tommy had started a digital art blog showcasing works by artists with physical challenges. Danny used social media to connect with other young parasport athletes worldwide. Charlie collaborated with musicians online, his compositions crossing borders and abilities. But it wasn't all triumphs and success stories. There were still difficult days when their bodies wouldn't cooperate, when fatigue overwhelmed them, or when the world seemed less than understanding. During these times, their family bond proved strongest. They had developed an unspoken language of support, knowing when to offer help and when to step back, when to push and when to rest. One summer evening, as the family sat in their backyard watching the sunset, Alex reflected on how far they'd come. The patio furniture had been arranged to accommodate their needs, the garden paths were wide enough for days when mobility was challenging, and the air was filled with the sound of Charlie practicing his latest composition while Tommy sketched and Danny stretched after his swimming practice. Rachel joined him, carrying cold drinks adapted with special grips. "Remember when we thought this wouldn't be possible?" she whispered, watching their sons engage in their various activities. Alex squeezed her hand, thinking about that day in the doctor's office when he'd received his diagnosis. How could he have known then that what seemed like the end of his dreams would lead to something even more beautiful? The boys had begun talking about their futures with increasing clarity. Tommy was interested in studying adaptive design, combining his artistic talent with his desire to help others like him. Danny spoke of becoming a physical therapist, wanting to support others in their journey to physical independence. Charlie, though younger, was already exploring music therapy as a way to help others find their voice. Their influence had spread beyond their small town. Other families raising children with similar conditions sought their advice and support. The boys' story had inspired changes in local schools, community centers, and public spaces. Their journey had shown that disability didn't mean inability, it just meant finding different paths to success. As the evening drew to a close, the family gathered for their nightly ritual of sharing highlights from their day. Each voice carried its own story of triumph, challenge, or discovery. Alex listened to his sons speak, their words confident and clear, and felt profound gratitude. The family he'd thought impossible had become not just possible but extraordinary, teaching him and countless others that love knows no limitations and family bonds transcend physical challenges. As the seasons turned, the family found themselves on the cusp of new beginnings. Tommy was 15 now, Danny 14, and Charlie 12. Their story had touched countless lives, but perhaps the most profound changes were happening within their own home, as each boy began charting his course toward the future. The turning point came when Tommy was invited to speak at a medical conference about living with their condition. Initially hesitant, he spent weeks preparing, working with his brothers to capture their shared experience. Alex watched with pride as his eldest son stood before a room full of doctors and researchers, his artwork projected on the screen behind him, telling their family's story from a perspective only he could offer. "Our condition isn't just about what our bodies can't do," Tommy told the audience, his voice steady despite his nerves. "It's about discovering what we can do differently. Every limitation has led to innovation, every challenge to creativity." His presentation included a virtual gallery of his artwork, each piece telling a story of adaptation and resilience. The impact was immediate and far-reaching. Medical researchers approached the family about participating in studies aimed at better understanding their condition. But it was the families in attendance, those facing similar challenges, who were most deeply affected. They saw in Tommy, Danny, and Charlie living proof that a diagnosis didn't have to define a life's trajectory. Danny's swimming had progressed to national competition level, but his impact extended far beyond the pool. He'd started a YouTube channel documenting his training journey, showing other young athletes with physical challenges how to adapt techniques to their abilities. His videos, filmed with Charlie's musical accompaniment and Tommy's artistic graphics, quickly gained a following in the adaptive sports community. One video particularly resonated, Danny teaching a young girl with their condition how to swim. Her transformation from fear to confidence, captured through Tommy's lens and set to Charlie's composition, went viral. Soon, families from across the country were reaching out, seeking guidance and hope. Charlie's musical journey took an unexpected turn when a renowned music therapy program invited him to participate in developing new techniques for physically challenged musicians. His innovative approaches to playing instruments, born from necessity, were helping create new pathways for others to express themselves through music. The boys' influence began reaching into unexpected places. Tommy's art was featured in a medical textbook about their condition, putting a human face on clinical descriptions. Danny's training methods were adopted by adaptive sports programs nationwide. Charlie's music therapy techniques became part of a pilot program at several children's hospitals. At home, the family dynamic continued to evolve. The garage-turned therapy room had transformed again, now housing a fully equipped adaptive art studio, a training area with specialized equipment, and a small recording studio. It had become a space where the boys could not only pursue their passions but also mentor others facing similar challenges. Alex's construction business had grown into a consulting firm specializing in accessible design, with Tommy occasionally contributing ideas based on his first-hand experience. Rachel had completed her doctorate in special education, her research focused on families raising children with genetic conditions. Their professional lives had become extensions of their personal journey. One spring morning, the family received an unexpected letter. A major children's hospital was planning a new wing dedicated to treating their condition, and they wanted the family's input on its design. The project would combine Alex's architectural expertise, Rachel's educational background, and the boys' lived experience to create a space that would serve families for generations to come. The design process became a family project. Tommy contributed ideas for an art therapy space, ensuring it would be accessible for patients with varying physical abilities. Danny helped design an adaptive therapy pool, incorporating features he discovered through his own training. Charlie consulted on the acoustics of music therapy rooms, making sure they would accommodate adaptive instruments. But amid all their public success, the family still faced private challenges. The boys' condition meant they had good days and bad days. There were moments of frustration when their bodies wouldn't cooperate with their ambitions, times when fatigue overwhelmed them, and occasions when the weight of being inspirational felt heavy on young shoulders. During these times, their family bond proved invaluable. They had learned to read each other's needs instinctively, knowing when to offer support and when to step back, when to push forward and when to rest. Their home remained a safe haven where they could be themselves, without the pressure of being role models or symbols of hope. One evening, as the family gathered for dinner, Alex noticed something remarkable. The table that had once been modified to accommodate their physical challenges now served as a platform for discussing their dreams. Tommy shared sketches for an inclusive art school he hoped to establish someday. Danny talked about his plans to create a nationwide network of adaptive sports programs. Charlie described his vision for a music academy that would welcome students of all abilities. Rachel caught Alex's eye across the table, both of them thinking the same thing. These weren't just dreams born of their own experience, but visions that would shape the lives of countless others. The diagnosis that had once seemed like a cruel twist of fate had become the foundation for something extraordinary. The boys' influence continued to ripple outward. Other families raising children with their condition sought their advice not just on medical matters, but on how to build full, purposeful lives. Medical students visited their home to learn about the daily reality of living with the condition. Architects consulted with them on accessible design projects. As Alex watched his sons navigate their teenage years with grace and determination, he reflected on how far they'd come from that day in the doctor's office when he'd received his diagnosis. The family he'd thought impossible had not only become possible but had grown into something more meaningful than he could have imagined. Their story had become a beacon of hope, showing that sometimes life's greatest challenges can lead to its most beautiful opportunities. The condition that had once threatened to prevent Alex from becoming a father had instead made him exactly the father his sons needed, someone who could understand their struggles firsthand and help them find their own paths to success. As another year passed, the family found themselves standing at the threshold of new chapters. Tommy, now 16, was preparing for his final years of high school. Danny, 15, was training for his first international competition. Charlie, 13, was composing pieces that would soon be played in therapy centers across the country. Their journey had come full circle, yet it was far from over. The family's annual beach vacation had become a tradition, but this year felt different. As they sat together on their accessible deck watching the sunset, Alex noticed how much his boys had grown. Not just physically, but in their understanding of themselves and their place in the world. The condition that united them had become not a limitation, but a foundation for their unique contributions to the world. Tommy had recently completed his first commissioned mural for the Children's Hospital where they'd spent so many hours during the boys' younger years. The piece depicted a journey of hope, incorporating elements from hundreds of stories shared by families facing similar challenges. Patients and their families would stop to touch the textured surfaces he'd specifically designed to be accessible to those with limited mobility. "I wanted them to see themselves in it," Tommy explained during the mural's unveiling. Not just their challenges, but their strength, their dreams, their potential. The hospital staff who had known him since childhood wiped away tears as they watched the once tiny patient now standing tall as an artist and advocate. Danny's swimming had opened doors nobody had imagined possible. His technique modifications were being studied by coaches working with physically challenged athletes, and his training videos had become a standard resource in adaptive sports programs. But it was his mentoring of younger athletes that brought him the most joy. During one of his training sessions, a parent approached Alex with tears in her eyes. "Before we found Danny's videos, my daughter thought swimming was impossible for her," she shared. "Now she doesn't just swim, she believes in herself." Alex watched as Danny demonstrated a modified stroke to a group of eager young swimmers, his patience and enthusiasm reflecting the same spirit that had carried him through his own challenges. Charlie's music had evolved into something extraordinary. His compositions, born from his unique perspective of living with physical challenges, spoke to listeners in ways traditional music couldn't. He'd begun working with music therapists to develop programs specifically for children with motor difficulties, proving that music could be both healing and accessible. The family's influence had grown far beyond their small town. Their story had inspired changes in medical education, with medical schools now incorporating their experience into training programs. Architects consulted them on accessible design projects, and educators sought their input on inclusive learning environments. But perhaps their greatest impact was on other families navigating similar journeys. Rachel had compiled their experiences into a guidebook for parents, combining practical advice with the emotional wisdom they'd gained over the years. The book wasn't just about raising children with physical challenges, it was about recognizing that every family's journey is unique and valuable. One chapter particularly resonated with readers, titled The Gift of Shared Experience. In it, Alex shared how his own condition had prepared him to be exactly the father his sons needed. "What I once saw as my greatest limitation," he wrote, "became our family's greatest strength. We understand each other in ways that go beyond words." Their home had become a lighthouse for families facing similar diagnoses. Regular weekend gatherings brought together parents and children, sharing stories, strategies, and hope. The garage-turned-therapy room-turned-studio space hosted workshops where the boys shared their skills, Tommy teaching adaptive art techniques, Danny demonstrating exercises, and Charlie leading music therapy sessions. The boys' future plans were taking shape. Tommy was exploring colleges with strong adaptive design programs, dreaming of creating spaces that would welcome people of all abilities. Danny's swimming achievements had caught the attention of Paralympic scouts, opening possibilities he'd never imagined. Charlie was collaborating with software developers on applications that would make music creation accessible to those with physical limitations. But beyond their individual achievements, the boys had developed a deep understanding of their role in a larger story. They saw their challenges not as obstacles to overcome, but as experiences that enabled them to help others. Their condition had given them not just a shared experience, but a shared purpose. One evening, as the family gathered for their nightly routine, Alex found himself overwhelmed with emotion. The scene before him was so different from the future he'd feared when he first received his diagnosis. Instead of limitation and loss, their lives were filled with purpose and possibility. Rachel joined him, understanding his thoughts without words. "Remember when we thought this wouldn't be possible?" she asked softly, watching as their sons engaged in their evening activities, Tommy sketching designs for his college application portfolio, Danny reviewing competition videos, Charlie fine-tuning his latest composition. "I remember thinking I couldn't be a father," Alex replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Now I can't imagine being anything else." Their journey had proven that family isn't defined by perfect health or typical abilities. It's built on love, understanding, and the courage to embrace life's unexpected turns. The diagnosis that had once seemed like an ending had become a beginning, not just for their family, but for countless others who found hope in their story. As the evening wound down, the boys gathered around their parents, each sharing their dreams for the future. Their voices were strong, confident, filled with the knowledge that they could shape their own destinies. The condition that united them had become not a barrier, but a bridge, to understanding, to purpose, to possibilities they'd never imagined. The family's story had become more than a tale of overcoming challenges. It was a testament to the power of redefining what's possible, of finding strength in shared experiences, and of turning personal challenges into opportunities to help others. What began as one man's fear of not being able to have children had transformed into a legacy of hope, proving that sometimes life's greatest gifts come in unexpected packages. As Alex looked at his family, at Rachel, who had embraced their journey with unwavering love and determination, at Tommy, whose art spoke to hearts beyond words, at Danny, whose spirit inspired others to push past their limitations, and at Charlie, whose music brought healing to countless souls, he realized that their story was still being written. Every challenge they faced, every obstacle they overcame, every life they touched added another chapter to a narrative that would continue to inspire generations to come. Their journey had shown that true family bonds transcend physical limitations, that strength can be found in vulnerability, and that love knows no bounds. The diagnosis that had once threatened to destroy Alex's dreams of fatherhood had instead led him to a life richer and more meaningful than he could have imagined, a life that proved that sometimes the most beautiful stories arise from our greatest fears.